In this video, I'm going to talk about how to keep your code lines to 80 characters long. First, I want to show you one setting that allows you to either wrap a text or let it run long. So notice here I have 3 paragraphs, 1, 2, 3, that are longer than what you can see. And I have to scroll over to see the end. And that one is so long I have to scroll over a long ways. Sometimes this can be awkward, sometimes it's valuable. So if you want to set it, the editors give you the chance to choose whether you want these to go long or whether you want them to wrap. So right now I've got them going long, and this is in Sublime. And the way that I set that is to go into View and check Word Wrap. And so now if I click it, notice how it's wrapping. So those 3 long paragraphs, now I can see them all. They wrap over there. But also notice that they're still on the same line. So this is all line 19, but the editor is showing it to me wrapped so that I can see it all on the screen. And if I make the editor wider, then the line itself gets lighter. If I make it shorter, then it gets shorter, and it wraps whatever width the editor is at. But the line numbers let you know that it's still on the same line. So here we have this long paragraph that's all on line 25, but we can see it all. To do that in Notepad++ is very similar. Simply go to View and click Word Wrap, and it will wrap up for you. And in Atom is also very similar. Simply go to View and find the Toggle Soft Wrap. So just click on it, and now it's long, and you have to scroll and toggle it again, and now it's wrapping and showing them all where you can see the whole thing, but demonstrating that it's all still on line 25. So all 3 of these editors allow you to change that setting in View. Another thing that editors do is tell you where you are. So I can put my cursor, I'm going to put my cursor right after that G on long, and I can look down here, and it says that I am on line 25, column 366. And so it tells me where I am. So notice that this line is far more than 80 characters long, because I'm not even at the end yet, and I'm at character 366. And the same in Notepad++, I can click right here at the end of January, and I can go down and I can see that I am on line 19 in column 133. Sublime, I can click right here after Pages, and it tells me I'm on line 25, column 361. So each of them tell you where you're at, and you have to put your cursor there, and then it tells you what line you're on and what column you're on. Now what we want to do is we want to keep our lines only 80 characters long. So here on line 19, this one is 246 characters long. So the way that I do that is I simply go to where I'm 80 characters. Right here I'm on column 70, there I'm on column 75, there I'm on column 77, and now if I go past variety, I'm going to be on 85, and that's too long. So I want to go before the word. I don't want to break it in the middle of the word, or that will make it variety, and that will be silly. So I want to go at the beginning of a word, and then I just push enter. And notice what it did. It ended line 19, and it started the next line on line 20. Again, I go to where I'm close to 80. Right there I'm on 75, and I click enter. And now this line is only 75 lines long, 75 characters long. And on this one, at the end is 83, so that's too long. So I go to the beginning of effective and push enter. And so now this paragraph that used to be long is now every line is less than 80 characters long. And I simply did that by clicking enter at a certain point in the paragraph. Now, because HTML ignores white space, remember that it replaces any white space with a single space. So that carriage return that I entered in there will be replaced with a single space. So when I go look at the web page in the browser, I refresh it, and nothing has changed. This is the paragraph that we just downsized to 80 characters in the code. But notice how it hasn't changed in the web page. It can still go long because those carriage returns were replaced with a single space. so they don't become visible in the web page. How we align our code in the editor does not impact how it displays in the web page. So we can put as many carriage returns as we like without impacting that. So this is how I make it 80 characters. I just find the end and click enter. And this works the same on all of them. So I'll reload this because it saw that I made that change. And so you see how now that one paragraph, instead of all being on line 19, now it's on line 19, 20, 21, and 22. I can do the same with line 24 by simply going and finding where am I? I'm on column 80. So I can put a carriage return there. And bring it down to the next line. Now I have found that it's easiest for me if I size my browser to be 80 characters wide. Not my browser, the editor. If I set up my editor so that it's 80 characters wide, then I can see where it's wrapping, right? And so if I just go, okay, how wide is that? That I put my cursor at 80 characters and on column 80, and I just make it, oop, that's too small. So I want to make it just big enough to hold 80. And then I can tell every time it skips line here, oh, that went further than 80. So I can simply go to the end of that line and click enter, and there it is. And that kind of just lets it be easy. Now in Atom, this 80 character style rule is so common that the editor itself has drawn a line. So you can see here that line where it is. And this tells you approximately where 80 characters is. And here we can see where we've changed that first paragraph to be spread over several lines and the second paragraph to be spread over several lines. And now we're on this third paragraph that is still very long. Notice that it's moved down to line 30 because we added those extra lines above. But if we look, we go in here at a word, we see that we're at column 271, so we're really long. And here we see where that happens. So I'm going to do the same thing here, but I'm going to go in and add enter signs. Now, notice that right here, this is all inside a quote. So I don't want to go inside here and enter, right? I don't want to put a carriage return inside quotes. So be careful with this. Make sure you're outside of quotes when you do that. So I can go back to that where it begins, where the quote begins, and push enter there. And I can choose to keep the attribute together if I want. So these would be personal choices where you say, well, I want the whole element to be on one line, or I want the whole attribute to be on one line, or I'm really okay just going to the quote and pushing enter there and putting that on a different line. And then we come back. And I think I'm going to go ahead and try to keep the attribute together. So I can say there's the href. And notice how this editor automatically indented when I do a carriage return at an attribute. And then I'll go to the next attribute, target, and push enter and put that on another line and then let it continue. Now if I want, I can go ahead and end it here as well when that A tag ends and get these characters and go down here and say, okay, directions won't fit. So I'll go back to the beginning directions and push enter and see how we're getting lines that are only 80 characters long. Here I go to journals and do that. Here I go to this plus and put it there. And in is a little bit long. So I'm going to do it at the beginning of in. And here, now notice what I have. Here I have an href. I'm going to put it on its own line like I did before. So I just pushed enter there. And I have this quote that everything, that the URL itself is longer than 80 characters. Like, I can't get that all on an 80 character line unless I put a carriage return in the quotes. So that's why the style rule says avoid codes of line that are longer than 80 characters. Rather than say never do it, it says avoid it. And this is one of those times when you can't avoid it. So what you do is go to the closing quote and push enter, and you leave that one on a line. So this one is on a line. Notice how it's wrapping, so I see it on two lines, but it's both on line 38. This whole thing is on line 38. And I've gone ahead and downsized it as much as I can without putting a carriage return in the quote. And those are allowed. So the times when that happens, you'll expect to see that longer than 80 characters. And then you'll go down to the next one and you'll continue on and say, well, I don't have to make this longer because I can break it there. That's not inside quotes. And I can take this href down and push enter, and that keeps it outside of, I'm not doing the carriage return in quotes. And then I'll go here and do the carriage return. And so for most of your lines, you can get them to be within that 80 character limit. And simply go to the end of the line and see what is the character. I'm on character 80. That's great. I haven't gone past it. And so you just line it up and you just add carriage returns where you need. And remember, don't add carriage returns inside a quote. So here you see where line 11 goes longer than 80 characters, and that's because that value is inside a quote, and the value itself is longer than 80 characters. Now, if I want to review my code to make sure they're all less than 80 characters, in Atom I can simply go down and see if they're all within that nice little line that shows me. And what I see here is one going over, but it's because of the quote itself. The URL is too long, so I know that's an exception that is okay. But notice how all the other lines are within that line. On the other editors that don't have that line that shows you the 80 characters, I like to make them just 80 characters wide. So here I've got a line, I look down here, it's column 79. So if I add a space, that gets me right at 80. So I'm going to go ahead and make it so it just barely fits there. So I'm at 80 characters wide on the editor. And then I can look through it and I can say, oh look, line 11 is spread over multiple lines. That means it's longer than 80 characters, but I see it's because of that what's in quotes is too long to fit. So there's that exception. Here I see that same URL that's too long, and then I see all these lines that are lined up, which means they're all within that 80 character limit. Here I see a gap, and again, it's a quote with a URL that's too long to fit. So notice on this A link that the A link begins here and ends here, and I ended up putting attributes each on their own individual lines. Here's the title attribute, the target attribute. This is a graphic link, so there's an image in there, and even within the image, the source attribute, the alt attribute, and the width and height attributes are all put on individual lines so they line up nicely without going outside of that 80 character limit.